What's up, everyone? This is Bobby Douglas, and welcome to my official 2024 NCAA Tournament bracket reveal. Spent a lot of hours preparing this bracket, watched a lot of film, looked at a lot of numbers. I think I went through about 10 to 15 drafts before settling on this finalized version. So without further ado, here we go, my official 2024 bracket. Hopefully it's a winner. Okay, so starting off, we got UConn versus Stetson. Stetson actually has a really fun player in Jalen Blackman, who scored 43 points in the ASUN title game. Thank you to the commenter in my last video who corrected me on that. But ultimately, I'll take UConn here. Really, no sweat for them. FAU versus Northwestern. Kind of a weird game because I feel like Florida Atlantic has never really looked right all year. I saw them opening night when they came to Wintrust Arena as part of that Barstool Classic, and they looked really good against Loyola Chicago. But throughout the year, they've lost to some teams that they shouldn't have lost to. It feels like none of their guys are good at the right time. Meanwhile, Northwestern is down likely 2 starters, definitely one in Ty Berry, and my guess is Nicholson is out for the tournament as well. But Boo Buie, I think, is the best player on the floor here, and they just have a tendency to stick around in games that they don't necessarily belong in. Northwestern's also a very underrated shooting team. They hit around 40% of their threes. Boo Buie is knocked down. Ryan Langborg is awesome from distance. Brooks Barnheiser can hit some shots as well. So I'll take Northwestern beating Florida Atlantic. San Diego State versus UAB. San Diego State, I don't think is upsettable just because of how physical they are defensively and how big they are across the board. UAB is a fun team. They won the American tournament, but overall, I like the Aztecs here. Auburn versus Yale. Yale just doesn't have the athletes or depth of Auburn. Give me the Tigers. BYU Duquesne. Duquesne shouldn't be an 11 seed, and BYU probably shouldn't be a 6 seed. I will take the Cougars here. They got 7 guys who score over 9 points a game. I don't think Duquesne has that type of firepower offensively, so I will take BYU. Illinois Morehead State. This is a really interesting game. Both teams are very good offensively. Morehead State has this really good inside-out forward in Riley Minix. But Illinois with Terrence Shannon Jr., Marcus Damask, Coleman Hawkins, they shoot the 3 really well. I think Illinois has too much talent for Morehead State. I will take the Illini. Washington State versus Drake. I love Washington State. I did a video on them. They are so surprising in terms of how they built their roster and how good they are. But Drake looked awesome in the Missouri Valley tournament. They had the best player on the floor, I think, in Tucker DeVries, who averages around 21 points a game. Darnell Brody is a tough interior presence to deal with. Drake's one of the best defensive rebounding teams in the country. I think I'm going to go with Drake here to beat Washington State. Iowa State, South Dakota State. This is a weird game, obviously, because of TJ Otzelberger, and he used to coach at South Dakota State. I still think Iowa State has way too much talent here. Give me the Cyclones. UConn versus Northwestern. Northwestern doesn't have the shot making of Connecticut. I will take the Huskies in a relatively easy game for them. San Diego State versus Auburn. Tough one because Auburn really doesn't do well against good teams this year. I think they only have 2 or 3 quad 1 wins on a year in about 11 opportunities. San Diego State, though, I don't know if they have the offensive firepower outside of Jaden Ledee to really get this done. I trust Auburn's shooters a lot more. Janai Broom is an awesome rim protector and rim finisher. And I also think Auburn can really stretch San Diego State out defensively and get in transition. I will take the Tigers beating the Aztecs here. BYU versus Illinois. I will take Illinois here. Should be an offensive fireworks show. I trust Illinois in their ability to almost get easier baskets than BYU. BYU is incredibly reliant on the three-point ball. Over half of their field goal attempts come from behind the arc. Illinois, meanwhile, I think can hurt you in a little bit more ways. I think they're a little bit more offensively versatile than BYU, and so I think they get into the Sweet 16. Drake and Iowa State, and what is just, the committee loves doing this, man, where they put the in-state teams together. I think Iowa State's defense is just so difficult to play against with their ball pressure among those 3 guards. I think Iowa State is just so physical, so good defensively, and they have a lot of guys who make the right plays at the right time offensively, whether it be Taman Lipsey, Keyshawn Gilbert, Milan Momcilovic. So give me the Cyclones here. Sets up a chalky Sweet 16. UConn versus Auburn. If UConn's going to lose at any point in this region, I think it would be to Auburn in the Sweet 16. Auburn's like a top 10 team, both offensively and defensively, per Bart Torvik and KenPom and all those sites. But so is UConn. UConn's right there with them. This shouldn't be a Sweet 16 game. This should be more of like an Elite 8 Final 4 game. But unfortunately, we're getting it early in the East region. UConn has home court advantage. They're going to be in Boston for this game. I think UConn is a little bit better and a little bit more put together than Auburn. Auburn also plays way too many guys. And I think that lack of a clear top 5 kind of does them in the end. UConn, I feel like everybody knows their roles. Cam Spencer, Alex Karaban can really shoot it. Klingon on the inside should limit Janai Broom. And overall, I really trust Tristan Newton over any of Auburn's point guards, so give me the Huskies. Illinois versus Iowa State. Typically in these situations, I like the offensive team over the defensive team, but I'm going to take Iowa State here, primarily because Illinois' two best players are not particularly good three-point shooters, and Iowa State's defense will give you the three-point shot. I think around 45% of their allowed field goal attempts are three-pointers. Marcus Damask doesn't shoot the three for Illinois. Terrence Shannon Jr. is very streaky. He can get hot, but he can also go super cold. So I don't think Illinois necessarily has the shooting around those two guys to punish Iowa State for giving them those looks. Meanwhile, Iowa State gets to go up against a very porous Illinois defense. So I will take the Cyclones here to beat Illinois. In the regional final, we have UConn versus Iowa State, and this is where I think UConn really just obliterates Iowa State's defense. UConn is so good moving off the ball, and they cause so much confusion for opposing defenses. Iowa State is so keyed in on ball pressure and stopping drives, but with UConn, it's not really about the on-ball stuff, it's about the off-ball stuff. Whether it be Karaban cutting or Cam Spencer flying around screens to get open threes, this team just knows how to punish every single defense they play. And I don't really see any holes in their roster that would prevent them from getting to a Final Four, so I will take the UConn Huskies getting back to the Final Four for the second straight year. Moving on to the South region, we have Houston versus Longwood. Houston got a game in the 116 matchup last year with Northern Kentucky. Don't think that happens this time around. I'll take Houston. Nebraska versus Texas A&M. I went back and forth on this one a lot, but ultimately I'm going to go with Nebraska. Here's why. I was doing some digging, and if you look at raw points per possession, Texas A&M is one of only 4 teams in the tournament who gives up more points than they score on a per possession basis. The other 3 are Wagner, Grambling State, and St. Peter's. That's not great company to be in. I think Nebraska has a lot of big guards that can cause A&M issues. Kisei Tominaga is super fun to watch, and he can heat up in a second. Rink Mass is a really nice post playmaker. He can score, he can pass, he can rebound. A&M does have the best offensive rebounding rate in the country, and that's like the only thing that I think keeps them in this game. Wade Taylor obviously is super fun to watch, but he hasn't really been efficient all year long. And so I will take Nebraska here. Wisconsin versus James Madison. I went back and forth on this one. I'm ultimately going to go with Wisconsin. It comes down to a few things for me. One, James Madison isn't really great at defending the post. And Wisconsin has 2 guys in Stephen Crowell and Tyler Wall who are excellent post scorers and playmakers. Also, I think AJ Storr is the most athletic and most electrifying player in this game. I think he can score and get to the rim whenever he wants. James Madison has guys who can score in Terrence Edwards and TJ Bickerstaff, but I don't think they're at the level of AJ Storr offensively. And so when I look at Wisconsin, they're going to rebound, they're going to defend. I really like James Madison, but ultimately I don't think it's a great matchup for them, so I'll take Wisconsin. Duke versus Vermont. Vermont's in this tournament every freaking year, it seems like, and they never really win. This was a weak America East, and it's a weaker Vermont team than we've seen in years past. So I'm going to take Duke here pretty easily. Texas Tech versus NC State. NC State's obviously on that crazy high of winning 5 games in 5 days to clinch their auto bid in the ACC. Texas Tech, though, I think has a little bit more perimeter explosion. Pop Isaacs and Joe Toussaint are both extremely quick guards who can score and distribute. Texas Tech also has one of the better offenses in the country. They have good shooters on the wing and guys like Kerwin Walton, Darion Williams, and Chance McMillan. NC State, meanwhile, I kind of think they're going to go back to their old form. This wasn't even close to a tournament team entering Champ Week. They needed a crazy shot against Virginia to even get to the title game where they beat North Carolina. I love DJ Burns. I think he could be a real issue for Texas Tech, but I will take the Red Raiders. Kentucky versus Oakland. Oakland's a weird team because they exclusively play zone, and normally I'd look at that and be like, hey, they could maybe catch some teams off guard. The problem is they're playing Kentucky, who is literally the best three-point shooting team in the country. They have a bevy of really talented guards who can dictate tempo, and they just have the athletes to kind of exploit that zone. So unfortunately for Oakland, I'm going to take Kentucky here, even though against a different 3 seed, I think Oakland could have caused some issues. Florida versus the winner of Boise State, Colorado. So I don't normally do this, but I'm actually going to do a split result here. If Colorado beats Boise State tomorrow night, I'm going to take Colorado to beat Florida. Colorado is really good in 3 key spots. They have a great point guard in KJ Simpson. They have a great wing in Cody Williams, who's going to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. Then they also have a really versatile scoring forward in Tristan da Silva, who averages around like 16 a game. Florida, meanwhile, the loss of Micah Hamilton is just so brutal for them. I really like their guards. I love Zion Poland. I love Walter Clayton Jr. Poland is excellent in pick and roll, and then, of course, Walter Clayton scores like 17 a game. But I'm going to take Colorado here to beat Florida. If Boise State does beat Colorado, which could happen, but I doubt it, I'll take Florida there. And then we get Marquette versus Western Kentucky. I'm going to go with Marquette, even though this 15 seed scares me. Western Kentucky has a bunch of high major guys that transferred down. They have Brandon Newman, who played at Purdue, Christian Lander, who played at Indiana. Don McHenry is their leading scorer, and he'll push the pace. Western Kentucky literally plays at the fastest tempo in America. 25% of their possessions come in transition, which is an absurd number. So this is a scary matchup for Marquette, especially considering we don't really know what's going on with Tyler Kolek. They keep saying he'll play, but how healthy will he be? We really don't know. But ultimately, I just am trusting Marquette to get this job done against a 15 seed. Houston versus Nebraska. This is where Keisei Tominaga, I just don't think sees the light of day. He's going to be exploited in this game on both ends of the floor. Houston's just way too physical, and so I'll take them moving on. Duke versus Wisconsin in a 2015 title game rematch. I will take Duke. I really, really like Jared McCain as kind of like an off-ball shooting threat. I think he hits 40% of his threes on the year. Jeremy Roach is an experienced guard who's been there before. Kyle Filipowski obviously is a great post-up player who can shoot the three as well at 7 feet. And then Duke also has like a lot of in-between guys that I really like when it comes to like Mark Mitchell and even Sean Stewart if he gets some minutes. So I think Wisconsin is a little bit overwhelmed talent-wise here, and I will take the Blue Devils. Kentucky versus Texas Tech. I will take Kentucky. Texas Tech, I just don't think has the offensive firepower to match up with Kentucky. Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepherd are just both so electric off the bench. I also think Kentucky has an advantage inside with their rotation of bigs, especially considering Warren Washington, Texas Tech starting center for the majority of the year. Doesn't look like he'll be playing in the tournament, so give me the Wildcats here. And then Colorado versus Marquette or Florida, depending on who wins that play-in game. Either way, I'm going to take Marquette here. I think Kolek and Iguodaro are so good in the pick and roll. Cam Jones is one of the smoothest scorers in the country, and he actually leads their team in scoring. David Joplin has been awesome as kind of like a big combo forward. Colorado is a good team. I just think Marquette might be a little bit of a wagon here, and I'll take them. Houston versus Duke. Tough game to predict, especially considering we don't know the health of Juwan Roberts. But assuming you get to the second weekend, I'd imagine he's a little bit healthier than he is now. And I think Duke doesn't really have the explosive guard play to really rattle Houston's defense. I think Houston will be very comfortable in this matchup. I think they can bully Filipowski off the block. They can force a lot of contested threes. Overall, like the combination of Shed, LJ Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp, there's enough dynamic shot making from Houston to get past the Sweet 16 after they lost to Miami last year in this round. And then we got Kentucky versus Marquette. This reminds me a lot of the 2017 regional semifinal where UCLA and Kentucky played, and ultimately it came down to which team played better defense. And that was Kentucky that year, but this year it's going to be Marquette. Kentucky's defense is really bad, and I think Iguodaro and Kolek will have a field day with that. Kentucky has the shot making to keep this interesting throughout, but overall I think Marquette is just so well oiled, and I think they get the job done. Elite 8, we got Houston versus Marquette. I am going to take Marquette to beat Houston here. Here's why. Houston is a very aggressive ball screen coverage team. They love to rattle point guards, and they'll almost give up the short roll and corner threes if it means that they can force turnovers near half court. The problem with Marquette is that Tyler Kolek is one of the best point guards in the country, and he doesn't get rattled. He's one of the best passers. He averages over 7 assists per game. And then you also have Oso Iguodaro, who's another really good passer in the short roll. So I think if there's an offense that's built to beat a Houston defense and make them look pedestrian, I think it's this Marquette team. Obviously, on the other end of the floor, Houston's one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. Marquette, that is their biggest weakness. But in a way, how much can that already be exploited considering it's a big strength of Houston and a big weakness of Marquette? Like, you know, going into that matchup that's going to be an advantage for Houston. So I don't really know in what other ways does Houston really exploit Marquette, especially on the defensive end. Marquette, I'm telling you, is just so well put together as a team. They are so disciplined defensively, and assuming Tyler Kolek is fully healthy, I like them to beat the Houston Cougars and get to the Final Four. Okay, now moving on to the Midwest region, we have Purdue versus the winner of Montana State and Grambling. It's not going to happen again. I'm picking Purdue. I'm not thinking twice about it. Utah State versus TCU. Utah State is interesting because obviously they don't return any scoring from last year's team. First-year head coach Danny Sprinkle. It's a really good story. They won the Mountain West regular season. TCU, meanwhile, has some good wins. They beat Houston, obviously. They won that crazy triple overtime game at Baylor. Emmanuel Miller's really good. He's really improved, 38% from three, around 16 points a game. Jameer Nelson Jr. has been awesome for them as a transfer from Delaware. And overall, if you look at TCU's lineup, it's old, right? A lot of seniors, a lot of juniors. They also force a lot of turnovers and actually lead the country in transition points. That's been a hallmark of Jamie Dixon for a while at TCU. And so I will take the Horned Frogs here. I just think that Big 12 conference play has kind of toughened them up here. Gonzaga versus McNeese State. First big upset here. Didn't even think about it and taking McNeese State. McNeese State is the only team in the country outside of UConn to be top 25 points per possession in both offense and defense. Gonzaga, meanwhile, finished the season strong, but this is not the level of talent Gonzaga is used to. McNeese State, meanwhile, is kind of tailor-made to go on a run. They shoot the three extremely well. They are an elite team at forcing turnovers. They will full court press you. They'll make you uncomfortable, and I'm not really sure Gonzaga is ready for that. So I will take the Cowboys here. Okay, Kansas versus Samford. They just announced that Kevin McCullough is out for the tournament. He won't be playing at all, which sucks for Kansas, obviously. Even with that, though, I still think Kansas wins. I think the coaching of Bill Self combined with the experience of DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams and Hunter Dickinson is enough to get it done against a very weird Samford team that will play super fast. They'll shoot a bunch of threes. They'll press you, all that stuff. But overall, I don't think that style of play for a team like Samford is sustainable against some of these bigger and more talented opponents. So even with the news of Kevin McCullough, I still think Kansas gets the job done here. South Carolina versus Oregon. Oregon shouldn't even be in the tournament, but they won the Pac-12 conference tournament, so they got in. South Carolina, meanwhile, nothing really stands out about them if you watch them play, but the thing is, they just have a bunch of guys who make timely shots, whether it be Talon Cooper or Michi Johnson in the backcourt, or BJ Mack posting up in the front court. They were picked to finish last in the SEC, and they really became one of the better teams in that conference by season's end. Oregon, meanwhile, they have some good guards in Shellstad and Jermaine Cousinard, and then big man in Fali Dante is awesome as well. He averages like 16 and 8. I'm going to take South Carolina. This is a close one for me, but I kind of just really am buying the job Lamont Paris has done this year, and I think they get a tournament win because of it. Creighton versus Akron. Akron's a weird matchup because they have two guys in Enrique Freeman and Ali who are big. They're like 6'7", 6'8". Ali is more of an outside-in guy, while Enrique Freeman is really good on the block. Creighton, I just think with that big three of Shireman, Trey Alexander, and Ryan Kalkbrenner, the way they are so perfectly molded to play together makes a difference here. I'll take Creighton. Texas versus the winner of Virginia and Colorado State. Either way, I like Texas to win this one. Dynamic backcourt of Max Asmus and Tyrese Hunter is a group that I've liked all season long, despite the results maybe not being there. They have two very solid rim protectors in Dylan Mitchell and Caden Shedrick. And so I think either way, Texas has enough pieces to get by whoever they may play. My guess is that it's Colorado State. I love Isaiah Stevens. But regardless of who wins that, give me Texas. Tennessee versus St. Peter's. St. Peter's, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the four teams in the tournament that gives up more points per possession defensively than they score offensively. As if that's not the disqualifier, they're also a 15 seed. They were like the 5 seed in the MAC tournament. Tennessee isn't going to lose this game. Give me the Volunteers. Purdue versus TCU. TCU maybe could speed Purdue up, just in terms of forcing their guards to make quick decisions and maybe getting some turnovers. Ultimately, though, I think Purdue is just a little bit too good. Braden Smith has been awesome for them this year. He's taken a massive leap. Lance Jones gives them some athleticism on the perimeter that they desperately missed last year. And then, of course, Zach Edey is just so hard to defend, such a dominant interior presence, so I will take the Boilermakers. McNeese State versus Kansas. I got the Cowboys again. This is where I think Kansas's lack of depth and overall health situation catches up with them. McNeese State is not the type of team you want to play if you are shallow. Again, they will press you. They will make you uncomfortable. They will guard you for 94 feet. They push the pace offensively. They hit threes. They space you out. I can go on and on about this team. Shahade Wells is an awesome point guard. He averages around 18 points and 5 assists per game. McNeese State also has some of the better athletes in the country. Christian Shoemate is just a phenomenal rim finisher despite only being 6'6". He can really get up. And again, they have 4 guys shooting over 40% from 3. This team, I will keep saying it, is built in the best way possible to get to the second weekend, and I think they get the job done here. Give me McNeese State over Kansas. South Carolina versus Creighton. I think Creighton has too much upper echelon talent. I mentioned how earlier South Carolina just has a lot of guys that make key plays in key times, but I don't really think they necessarily have a go-to guy. Creighton, meanwhile, has 3 of those guys, and so I think ultimately Stars win in the tournament. Give me the Blue Jays. Texas versus Tennessee in the Rick Barnes revenge game, even though it's kind of like 10 years delayed or something. Texas is an interesting team. I had them ranked really high in the preseason, but ultimately I'm going with a team that's been way better than them all year in Tennessee. Dalton Knecht is an absolute monster. 3-level scorer, averages around 21 points a game, and Tennessee has literally never had a player like that in the Rick Barnes era, and I think that's good enough to get them to the Sweet 16. Purdue versus McNeese State. This is where I think McNeese's Cinderella story comes to an end. Give me the Boilermakers. Just, again, I don't know how you defend Zach Edey. McNeese State isn't a particularly big team. Their tallest guy is like 6'7". I just don't know how they deal with Zach Edey. And obviously the playmaking of the guards has gotten so much better where I don't think they're going to be as rattled by McNeese State's defense. Give me the Boilermakers. And then in the other Sweet 16, we got Creighton versus Tennessee. I just cannot trust Tennessee to get to the Elite Eight this year. I don't care if you had Kevin Durant on this team, which of course Rick Barnes did have in 2007 and didn't get to the Sweet 16. But yeah, I've seen this team too many times collapse offensively in key moments, whereas Creighton is one of the best defenses in the country that people don't talk about, thanks to the rim protection of Ryan Kalkbrenner, one of the best defenders in the country. Baylor Shireman, Trey Alexander. Alexander can obviously get shots in the mid-range and really is averse to contest because of how good he is at getting his shots off at different angles. Baylor Shireman will launch from deep. He'll stretch out that Tennessee defense. And so overall, I trust Creighton's firepower and balance to get them past Tennessee here. Setting up an Elite Eight matchup with Purdue and Creighton. Initially, when I had this, I took Creighton, but I'm going to take Purdue here. Purdue, I just think, has more guys that can hurt you, right? With Zach Edey commanding all the attention he does and the amount of fouls he draws, I could see a situation where Kalkbrenner gets into foul trouble, and then after that, Creighton doesn't really have another big that they trust. And again, it just comes down to the enhanced poise of Braden Smith for me, too. He is so much better in ball screen situations. He doesn't turn the ball over as much. He plays off of 2 feet. He makes the right read. Then obviously the overall shooting. Purdue hits 41% of their threes on the season. That's like a 10-point increase compared to last year. So make no mistake, this team is way better than they were last year, and they were a 1 seed last year, right? So I am taking the Boilermakers to the Final Four. And finally, we have the West region. First game we have here is North Carolina versus the winner of Howard and Wagner. That's actually going on right now as I'm recording this. Either way, I will take North Carolina. Mississippi State versus Michigan State. This game I just hate to pick because I kind of like both teams to win a game in the tournament going into the bracket. So it kind of sucks that they're paired against each other. Mississippi State has Josh Hubbard, who is just an electrifying shot maker for a freshman. He's going to be so good for them in the coming years. However, I'm going to go with Michigan State here. I trust Izzo. I trust Tyson Walker. Obviously, they were my preseason national champ. I should probably get that out of the way. And spoiler alert, I'm not picking them to win it all. Okay, listen, I've learned my lesson here. But I do think they have enough to get past Mississippi State. Michigan State has a really underrated defense. They're top 10 nationally when it comes to defensive efficiency. And I think that's enough here, combined with who I think is the best player on the floor in Walker to get the job done. St. Mary's versus Grand Canyon. This is a very popular upset pick, but I have a little theory on St. Mary's, and I will pick them. St. Mary's plays these types of teams throughout the entire regular season, given their conference. And they went 15-1 against those types of teams, right? Those mid-majors, those quad 3, quad 4-ish teams, right? And while Grand Canyon is certainly better than the majority of the teams in the WCC, I kind of just don't think St. Mary's is built to lose to a team that's worse than them. They play an extremely grinding, slow burn style of basketball that really gets under opponents' skins. Grand Canyon, meanwhile, has Tyon Grant Foster, who's been awesome. They also have a very good defense as well. They have a big win over San Diego State. But ultimately, the way St. Mary's is playing right now, the way they defend, the way Augustus Marcelonis has taken over as the primary ball handler there, I will take the Gales. Alabama versus Charleston. Charleston, I just have never really seen the vision with. They're going to take a ton of threes. They're going to play a lot of guys. But Alabama, I just think, does that better. So I'm going to take Bama. Clemson versus New Mexico. I'm rolling with the Lobos all day here. Clemson's perimeter defense is going to struggle mightily against the guards of New Mexico, whether it be Jalen House, Jamal Mashburn Jr., or Donovan Dent. And I think that's a little bit too much to overcome for the Tigers. Baylor versus Colgate. Give me Baylor. Colgate is always in this tournament. They play in a really bad league, and this is maybe the worst Colgate team in the last 5 years, which is, on one hand, a testament to Matt Langle because they've gotten to the tournament all those years, including this one. But on the other hand, they didn't win any of those games when they were in it previously, so I don't think they all of a sudden rise up and beat Baylor here. Give me the Bears. Dayton versus Nevada. This game I went back and forth on for a very long time. Probably my closest call in the first round. I'm going to go with Dayton here purely from the argument of I think Deron Holmes II is the best player on the floor. 6'11" big guy who's incredibly mobile. He can hit threes. He passes really well out of the post. He scores. He averages around 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. And I don't know if Nevada has the front court bodies to really make him uncomfortable, especially when you consider Dayton as a team hits like 40% of their threes. And Deron Holmes is a very good post passer, as I already mentioned. So I think that offense is going to be humming against Nevada. Nevada's not a 10 seed. They underseeded this team. And while I really like Jared Lucas, and he's obviously been on some runs before in the tournament, Keenan Blackshear is awesome as well. I just think Dayton has too much offensive firepower here, and I will have them beating the Wolfpack. Arizona versus Long Beach State. Long Beach State has 3 wins over high major teams this year, which I don't know has ever been the case for a 15 seed. The thing is, though, you got to remember, those 3 wins against high major teams were DePaul, Michigan, and USC. Give me Arizona here. It's a weird situation, obviously, with Dan Munson being fired for Long Beach State, but still coaching through the tournament. Arizona just has too many, shot makers, talent, size, whatever you want to say. I just think Arizona's a better team by a wide margin. North Carolina versus Michigan State. This is where my trust of Michigan State kind of runs out here. Again, they're kind of a team similar to Florida Atlantic where they just have never seemed right all season. Meanwhile, North Carolina has really rebounded from last year. RJ Davis averages 21 points a game, was just named first team All-America. Armando Bacot is still there in the post, and he's going to be the best front court player in that matchup between the two teams. I really like the versatility that Harrison Ingram provides on the wing. Cormac Ryan hits timely shots on the perimeter to complement RJ Davis. And so I think Carolina just has enough firepower and overall cohesion to get the job done against Michigan State. St. Mary's versus Alabama, just a clash of styles here. As St. Mary's obviously will play very slow. Alabama, meanwhile, will play very fast. I'm taking the Gales here primarily because if you look at how they play defense, they are very good at limiting three-point attempts. Only 29% of opponent field goal attempts against St. Mary's are threes. Obviously, that contrasts with what Alabama wants to do, which is like launch from 3, right? They shoot over 30 a game. And so I think Alabama is going to have a really hard time, A, speeding this game up to the tempo that they want it to be played at, and B, just getting the shots that they're typically used to getting, right? St. Mary's has enough guys with Aiden Mahaney, Augustus Marcelonis, Alex Dukas, Mitchell Saxon. They have enough guys to make Alabama work defensively. And this team is kind of a sleeping giant. They're top 30 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. So this is a good team. They had a brutal non-conference, but I do think they're better than Alabama, and I expect them to win. So give me the Gales over the Crimson Tide. New Mexico versus Baylor. I'm going to go with New Mexico here. I really like this team, really, really like this team. Donovan Dent and Jalen House are so good at getting rim pressure for guards of their size, and they're just so quick. They are so good with the ball. Great passers, great rim finishers. Baylor, meanwhile, is very reliant on the three-point shot. I saw a stat somewhere that said in losses, Baylor shoots 29% from 3. In wins, they shoot 40% from 3. New Mexico only allows 30% from 3 as a team defensively. So I don't think that bodes well for Baylor. I expect New Mexico to really dictate this pace. I expect their guard to get downhill. I expect them to hit threes, and I expect them to rebound. So I think New Mexico is one of the best teams in this region. They shouldn't have been an 11 seed. So give me the Lobos over Baylor. Dayton versus Arizona. Arizona just is too good defensively to really let Deron Holmes do whatever he wants on the block, whether it be Keyshawn Johnson or Umar Ballo. They can throw some size at him, which I think would fluster Dayton's overall offensive flow. Meanwhile, when you have guys on the perimeter like Caleb Love, who has been here before, and then Kylan Boswell, who is just so composed as a primary ball handler, I like Arizona to beat Dayton here. Moving on, North Carolina versus St. Mary's. This game, I think, could go either way. I think North Carolina just has too many weapons for St. Mary's. I think a key factor in this matchup will be Elliot Cadeau as someone who can grab the ball on outlet passes and really push the pace and make St. Mary's guard in transition. I think they're built to handle St. Mary's' rebounding, which is nationally elite on both ends, with guys like Armando Bacot really being able to assert dominance in position underneath the basket. So I will take North Carolina here. New Mexico versus Arizona. I told you I like this Lobo team. I still like them. I'm taking them to beat Arizona. For me here, not only do I really like New Mexico, and I've already kind of harped on that, But with Arizona, doesn't it just always feel like they don't play well against teams that they're supposed to be better than? Whether it be last year in the tournament versus Princeton, or whether it be this year where they lost to teams like Stanford, Oregon State, Washington State twice. It just feels like Arizona always has something missing. And I think the intensity with which New Mexico plays is really going to bother Arizona, right? New Mexico is a team that's comfortable playing at a breakneck pace, which is what Arizona wants to do. And I don't really see any discernible advantage for Arizona against New Mexico. So again, I'm picking the Lobos here. And then finally in the Elite Eight, we have North Carolina and New Mexico. I'm going to do it. I am picking the New Mexico Lobos to the Final Four. Again, it comes down to guard play, two elite cohorts of guards on both ends. Not going to, argue that. But again, it's just the downhill driving ability of Dent and House. And then it's also the comfort taking tough shots with a guy like Jamal Mashburn, who, if he can get hot, I don't know how North Carolina defends him. North Carolina, meanwhile, they're a very good team. I feel like they've beaten up on a rather weak ACC. And just like straight up, I almost feel like New Mexico has more talent than North Carolina, which is crazy to say about an 11 seed. But that's just kind of the way I feel. I think Nelly Jr. Joseph and JT Toppin can really hold their own against North Carolina's front court. New Mexico also has guys like Mustafa Amzil or Jamarl Baker coming off the bench who can both hit threes. And I just kind of think they're a better team, honestly, like straight up. And again, this might blow up in my face. New Mexico could lose to Clemson for all I know. But that's just the way I'm kind of going with this West region. I don't like any of the top teams in this West region a whole lot. So I kind of just figure, why not take a flyer? New Mexico, I think, is legitimately the best team in this region. I'm going to take the Lobos here. Okay, so now we got Final Four. First up, we got UConn versus New Mexico. New Mexico, I think, is a very good team. They are not better than UConn, though. I'm not that crazy. Give me the Huskies here in the national championship game. Just, again, like the overall offensive cohesion, the defense, the intensity, Dan Hurley being one of the best coaches in the game. Just too much for New Mexico to handle. They had a nice run here, but UConn is one of the best teams in the country, and they get to where the best teams in the country belong. On the other side, we have Marquette-Purdue in a rematch of the Maui Invitational title game. Purdue only won that game by 3 points, but the entire time I kept feeling like Purdue should have been winning by more. And so I'm taking the Boilermakers. This is where I think Marquette's lack of rebounding really hurts them, as again, Edey's so difficult to deal with on the block. Purdue has so many shot makers from behind the arc, and Marquette's lack of size I think really worries me in this matchup. So I will take Purdue, which sets up a UConn versus Purdue national championship game. I feel like these two teams have kind of been on a collision course all year long. I think at least dating back to early January for me, it kind of always seemed like these were the two teams that were going to end up in the championship game together. And while I think UConn would beat Purdue in a best-of-7 series, I'm going to take Purdue as my champion. I really just buy the attitude of this team. They seem very at peace with what happened last year. They haven't for a second let it affect their play this year. Their guards have shown so much growth, the addition of Lance Jones. And when it comes down to it, I don't think UConn has really been tested stylistically the way Purdue will test them. Offensively, it's so hard to move when you have guys like Zach Edey in the paint, right? It just takes up space. I think Purdue's defense can do a really good job at kind of limiting the overall fluidity and motion of UConn's offense. Klingon versus Edey would be an awesome big man battle. But overall, I just think Purdue gets it done this year. I think they win it all. And for a final score, I'm going to say, I think it'll be close. I'm going to say it will be 74-71 Purdue. So with that, there is my official bracket for the 2024 NCAA Tournament. And before I sign off, I just want to say to all of you who watched, listened, interacted with me in the comments, thank you so much for an awesome year. Had a really fun time putting out content for you guys. Whether it was Robbie Avila, whether it was Northwestern early in the season, whether it was talking about how bad DePaul was, just all of it was a blast for me. I had so much fun. So seriously, thank you guys so much. Enjoy March Madness. Give me your Final Four national champion picks in the comments. I love reading through all of those. And we'll see you soon.